From a bar chat to a gun to my head, and other true stories of narrow escapes. Story 1. I was in my early 20s when I frequented a local dive bar. One evening, a local patron, who I often spoke with, offered to help me with a mechanical issue I was having with my car. He came to my house the next day as agreed and picked up my car. At that time, I gave him $100 for a specific part he said he needed to fix it. Later that day, he returned to my house with my vehicle and another man. The car had not been fixed, and he said he needed another $200 for parts. Both men were clearly on drugs. I told him I didn't have the money and that I would just drive him home, and I would have him fix it in the next couple weeks when I had saved the money. While driving them home, the man who I didn't know pulled out a gun and held it to the back of head and told me drive to a secluded location. On the way out to this location, my gas light came on. He instructed me to pull into a gas station. When we pulled, we exited the vehicle and walked up to an ATM just outside of the gas station. He held his gun against my side as we walked up to the ATM. I reached into my back pocket, pulled out my wallet, and threw it toward the door of the gas station. I have no idea why I did this. I just knew I had to do something to throw him off. He immediately cursed at me and went toward my wallet, and I took off running and went behind the gas station and kept running toward a field. I never turned around until I got to a tree line where I could see the gas station behind me about 100 yards. I had no wallet, no cell phone, and I could see my vehicle going very slowly up the road in the direction I was hiding. With the driver's side window down, this man was now driving my car. He reached his gun out the window and fired 6 shots towards me. He then sped off down the road. I continued to stay where I was until 3 police vehicles with sirens going arrived at the gas station. I started walking back to the gas station and towards the police with my hands up. I was never so happy to be placed in handcuffs. Story 2. The neighbor with the knife, pesticide, coke, zip ties, and a murder plan. I was working from home one morning and heard a knock at the door at 8 a.m. I ignored it at first, hoping whoever it was would go away. After a minute of knocking, I opened the door. It was my neighbor who I'd spoken with a few times. My wife was at work, and I could tell he was surprised when I opened the door and not my wife. He was expecting her to be home and not me. He noticed that I recently purchased a new car and asked if I could show it to him. I tried to walk inside, but I asked him to walk around to the garage because of COVID-19. I showed him the car, and he was acting strange, always kept one hand in his pocket. My garage is very small, so we were in close proximity to each other. He kept inching closer to me, which made me uncomfortable. He brought an open Coke bottle filled with a tan liquid and said, "I brought you a Coke." I declined the offer. After a few minutes, he asked if he could see my gauge cluster. He walked around to the driver's side, and I sat in the driver's seat to turn on the car and show him the gauge cluster. With door open, there was very little room besides the side of the car and the garage wall. After turning on the car, he pulled a large hunting knife to my neck. I immediately grabbed his wrist and slammed him back into the wall. At this point, we are wrestling between the car and wall as I try to get the knife away from him. During this 30-second period, it seems like an absolute miracle that I was not stabbed. The blade grazed past my stomach multiple times. I was eventually able to grab the knife and force him out into the driveway. Immediately after grabbing the knife, he started saying, "What are you doing? I was just trying to show you my knife," and acting like I had just assaulted him. I was in such a state of shock that I actually started to believe him and wondered if I had overreacted. I know this seems ridiculous, but I was completely delusional at the time and did not know what his intentions were. I stood in the driveway, hands shaking, with 911 dialed on my phone, but did not make the call. He acted like nothing just happened and started asking my questions. Really suspicious questions. "Do you have a security system?" I lied and said yes. I asked him to go home multiple times and eventually went back inside the house, but did not shut the main garage door. At this point, I needed to drive into work and started getting ready, showering, getting dressed, etc. I assumed he had just walked back home. After getting ready, I went outside and walked around the house to the garage with a can of bear mace. I searched around the garage and was worried he was still there. As I started to get into my car and leave, I saw my neighbor laying down behind some boxes in the garage staring at me. I yelled and ran as fast as I could back to the front door and called the cops. Cops arrived quickly, and my neighbor had disappeared. They searched around his house and mine but could not find him. They said they would stay in the area but were going to leave for now. My house is surrounded by woods and I have a large back porch. Frightened, I stood in the middle of the porch while holding bear mace. I looked around and noticed my neighbor hiding in the woods staring at me. I ran back inside and called the cops. Cops arrived quickly and pulled guns on my neighbor and arrested him. He later said I was just trying to scare him. They found the knife, zip ties, vodka, and a note on him that read, "Turn around and put your hands behind your back." Oh, it was later discovered that the Coke bottle he wanted me to drink contained pesticides. He was there to murder me or my wife. He was charged with 3 felony counts and is currently awaiting trial. Story 3. My ex was insanely abusive, left me for dead once, and I overheard him on the phone talking to someone about what to do with the body. He had put my head through the car window and dragged me inside and threw me onto the bathroom floor. I woke up because I started drowning in my blood face down. I managed to escape and call my mom. She got me a taxi to a hotel out of his area until I could get home the next day. She actually drove there to pick me up from another state because I had too many injuries to fly. Police didn't do much because I crossed state lines. This happened on the West Coast where he lived. I was originally from the South. Cops were very uncooperative, kept saying they'd get back to me, checked out his place, found some blood, chalked it up to a domestic dispute. I got exhausted from the whole thing. A year later, he dated another girl, cut her head off and dismembered her. He's serving like 25 to life, I think. Story 4. I was 15 and my dad plotted to murder me. My dad had only been back around for a few months after being homeless for a while due to his 20-plus year meth addiction. He had never been violent towards me before, but I later found out he had tried to kill my mother just months prior and she brushed it off as him having a PTSD episode. I came home from school. He surprise attacked me by suffocating me with a pillow strangling and attempted to sexually assault me. I had just gotten a boyfriend and wasn't around as often, and by the language he used when trying to assault me, it was clear this was the source of his anger. He had the TV turned up to an extreme volume so no one could hear me scream. I ended up being able to get up and run to the bathroom, the only room in our house with a lock. He grabbed the door, but I found a sharp object in the bathroom and told him to back up or I'd kill him. I somehow was able to shove the door shut and lock it. He tried to get in the bathroom but couldn't. He actually said, "I'm leaving," and opened and closed the front door to try and lure me out. It was quiet for a while, but then I heard him breathing outside the door. He eventually left after a few hours, taking my money I had hidden in my bedroom, and called a relative telling them I'd been in a terrible accident and he needed a ride to the hospital. He ended up running when dropped off and was missing for a year. Most terrifying year of my life. His body was found by a fisherman at his favorite lake growing up. They found high levels of meth in his system, and it appeared to be a Suez. Later, when investigating the home I was attacked in, they found hammers, duct tape, knives under my mom's mattress and looked like he very much so intended to kill me. Story 5. While transferring work locations, I was staying with a cousin of mine at the new location. Her psychotic, alcoholic, drug-addled, vicious ex-boyfriend, whom she had just kicked out of her house, was stalking her. He saw me move in, assumed I was the new boyfriend, and lay in wait for me outside her house one night, where he jumped me from behind and slit my throat. Despite losing massive amounts of blood, I didn't die. I didn't even feel that bad. So while he was trying to break into her house, presumably to kill her too, I grabbed a baseball bat from the trunk of my car and beat him until I passed out. When I woke up, I wasn't thinking all that clearly, so I went inside, cleaned myself up, and drove to the hospital. My cousin wasn't even home at the time. She had gone into the city with her mother for the weekend to see a show and go shopping. My attacker and I ended up in the same ICU. I had rendered him a quadriplegic. There was a great deal of civil and criminal legal bullshit to deal with, but in the end, I was cleared of any wrongdoing, and he was put on probation for 10 years. As he was no longer able to so much as brush his own teeth, his lawyer provided by his wealthy family convinced the judge DA that he was no longer a threat to anyone, and the state would be spared the burden of providing him the round-the-clock care he needed if he wasn't sent to prison. I was left in massive debt, which took me many years to pay off. I did sue him for the injuries I sustained, but despite being a trust fund baby from a wealthy family, he himself was indigent. He'd blown his trust fund on drugs, booze, and gambling, and had nothing. His family provided him with everything, including his lawyer. Story 6. Not my story, but my cousin's. She was married to this crazy man. I won't go into detail about the ways he was awful, but he was insane. Also, before he married my cousin, he had another family who all died in a house fire. All four of his children and his previous wife. We all felt bad for him for suffering such a tragic loss because we didn't know what he was like behind the scenes at home. We never suspected anything off about that. Just thought it was a tragedy. Finally, my cousin decided to leave him. She took her 2 kids and moved away. She had to leave abruptly, so she was missing a lot of important things. Social security cards, birth certificates, stuff like that. One day after things cooled down, some between her and her ex, she arranged for her to go over to their old house and gather the rest of their things. He asked that she bring the kids because he missed them. Luckily, she decided to let them stay at their friend's house instead. She went over to the house and he was absolutely enraged that she didn't bring the kids. He shot my cousin 4 times and then shot himself in the head. He was planning to do a murder suck with the whole family. That's why he wanted the kids there. My cousin was shot twice in the neck, in the face, and in the arm. Somehow, none of the bullets struck any major arteries or anything. She was able to make it next door to her neighbor's house and get help. She survived a murder suck attempt, and her ex didn't. That whole thing really makes me look at that house fire tragedy in a different light. Story 7. I was waiting at the bus stop. It was only me and an older woman waiting there. I had received a phone call from my partner a few moments earlier about how there had been a stabbing and that I should stay safe. A few minutes after that call, a man crossed the road, walked up to me and hit me over the head with a wooden fence post. I blacked out. Not sure how long it was for, but I came to on the floor with blood spilling out from my head. It's foggy. I don't remember his face, but I know I looked up, said, "What the F," over and over. I somehow managed to stand up and run. I don't think he expected me to get up and was put off guard. I know now that around 30 minutes before hitting me, this man had stabbed and killed a 24-year-old man. I often think about how, if I hadn't woken up in that moment, I most likely would have been killed. This guy had done it before. He had the capacity to. I ran across the road almost getting hit by a car and made it to a pharmacy where amazing staff took care of me while we waited for an ambulance. I apologized many times for getting so much blood on their floor. I remember finding my wallet and phone in my pockets, realizing that this guy did what he did solely to hurt me, made me break into tears. I made it to hospital, gave a 12-page statement to the police. They took my clothes as evidence, my favorite Baylor Club shirt, which was covered in my blood. I'm still mad I wore it that day. I got 7 stitches in my head. I passed out when getting them. My family smuggled in some McDonald's, and I requested some earphones because I knew I wouldn't sleep that night. I think I listened to like 5 giant bomb podcasts that night. Sorry, this is disjointed. These are just the things I remember. It was a long recovery, lots of hard moments. It really shakes your trust in strangers when one tries to kill you unprovoked. 2 years after, there was a trial where they sent him to a mental prison. It was a long week. While there, I met the mother of the man he had killed. She cried throughout every day. When I met her, I completed froze. I couldn't say anything. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, even though I did nothing. Story autori, continuing. Not me, but my mom. A man entered her house just before lunchtime and stabbed her and her maid multiple times. He also kept punching both of them while stabbing them. Eventually, he got tired and left. My mom played dead then. When she was sure that they were alone, she checked on the maid to see if she was still alive. Both of them survived the attack, but the police never found the guy. The thing is, my mom knows the guy. See, she owns a flower shop and had 2 people working for her. One of them is this nice gay guy, and that guy had a boyfriend. It was the boyfriend who attacked my mom, and my mom told me that he was high and was looking for money. It seemed like his boyfriend didn't want to give him money that day, so he decided to attack his BF's employer instead. Since then, my vibrant, outgoing mom became reclusive, and she developed various health conditions. She's also always in a state of pain, which led her to become dependent on pain meds. The meds ruined her kidneys and liver, and now she's undergoing dialysis for it. Story 9. My drunk ex-husband came home in the middle of the night while I was sleeping. He was pissed off at me for some unknown reason and got on top of me in bed and strangled me to the point where he thought he had killed me. When I came to, he was sitting on the side of the bed crying. He had choked me so badly that I had broken blood vessels in my eyes. I never spent another night under the same roof as him, and we divorced soon after. Story 10. It happened during my first year in uni. I lived with 3 roommates at my dorm. A few months into the first semester, one of my roommates had a mental breakdown and attempted to strangle me while I was asleep. I woke up to his hands around my throat, his knee on my chest, and a deranged look on his face. I tried pushing him off me, clawed at his face, etc., but to no avail. My eyes started to dim. My hands felt leaden. I was sure I was going to die. Fortunately, my other roommate wasn't asleep. He was laying under the covers, browsing on his phone. The sounds from our struggle caught his attention, and after seeing what was happening, he pushed the attacker off me and knocked him to the ground. He then woke the other roommate, and together they restrained the attacker on his bed and called the university police. The police arrived around 15 minutes later, and after we told them what happened, they called the actual cops. My roommate was arrested and taken to the police station. There he had another breakdown and bit one of the cops. He was transferred to a psychiatric facility after that. He was also expelled from the university. Story 11. Not me, but my dad. When he was in his early 20s, he was in a band staying in a hotel with his then GF when he woke up in the middle of the night to someone trying to rape her. He pushed him off and they started to fight. He tells the story comically about they fought through the hotel out onto the street. Long story short, the guy ends up stabbing my dad 11 times and leaving him to die on the sidewalk. A stranger was walking his dog at 5 a.m., calls an ambulance, and keeps on his way. They come save my old man, reinflate his lung, and he survives. Attacker gets caught and thrown in jail. Find out he had gotten out of jail 2 days prior to the attack for stabbing another person to death. Fast forward a couple years again, and my dad's playing in a band in a bar owned by his buddy Spots. The guy who stabbed him tells his friend who owns the bar, "That guy's gotta go. That's the guy who nearly killed me." Stabber gets kicked out and was found hanging the next day in his hotel room. But wait, there's more. 35 years later, my aunt moves to the city we live in and hits up some dating app or some ish and meets the officer who responded to my dad's attack when he was a rookie. So a lifetime later, my dad gets to shake the hand of the cop who helped save his life nearly 4 decades earlier. Shit is crazy. Story 12. There was a girl in the village of my parents' vacation home who was known to have mental health issues. My family never judged her for it. Both my parents are teachers and used to deal with slow students that say some wicked things every now and then. When I was 2, my parents went on vacation, and so did that girl's family. That girl was 12. Both families were having lunch together, and my parents left the girl to play with me. When my sister, 9 at the time, went to look for me, I was being drowned in a water tank by said girl who was just looking at my sister smiling and saying some weird things. My sister screamed, and my parents and the girl's family went to the rescue in time to save me. I have no memory of this, so all I know is the story my family told me a few times. I haven't actually met this girl yet. Neither have I ever talked to her family. Both families still go on vacation to the same village at the same time, but my parents cut ties with them. Story 13. My older sister was incredibly abusive towards my family, but especially me. I'm away now, so no worries. When I was 14, our dad and her were having a super petty argument that just exploded into her, trying to kill him while he tried to defend himself without hurting her. She tried to stab him 3 times over, but thankfully failed as my dad disarmed her. I could only watch this whole thing happen completely frozen. She then turned to me and let out a horrible scream that I will always remember. She grabbed a knife off the floor and lunged at me, knocking me to the ground. She swung the knife towards my eye while screaming something along the lines of, "I'm taking your eye." She kept pushing the knife towards it, but I managed to put my hands over hers and pull it off. My dad also tried to pull her off, but when she got like this, she had this insane primal strength and could barely be moved. The knife then cut underneath my eye, nearly hitting the eyeball. As usual with these events, nothing came of this, and my mom and sister still gaslight me and say that I had some glandular issue, and that's how I got a scar. Story 14. Well, years and years ago when I was in elementary school, a new student came, and I was essentially designated his friend. Fast forward a few months, and I'm having the sole play date I ever had with him, during which he attempted to throw darts, the kind that pierced the wall at my head, and a few minutes later chases me around screaming at me, holding a surprisingly large branch. His mother did not care, although she did disturbingly calmly call my mom when I asked to leave. Fast forward a few days, and he's being ushered out of the classroom and is no longer permitted near me because the teacher caught him writing a letter detailing all of the ways he planned to torture and eventually execute me. When the school tried to have him tested, his mom pulled him out and sent him to a private school. Oh, he also threatened to tie me up in the woods a few trees next to a parking lot near the school and come back at night with a knife. Sort of more a constant threat of murder situation than actual concerted murder attempt, besides the playdate thing. Somehow I wasn't especially affected by that whole fiasco. Honestly, I was kind of somewhere in the realm of bemused. Although when I was reminded of him a couple of years later, I'll admit I had a few sleepless nights, possibly one hallucinatory vision of him crawling around on a ceiling. I got over it pretty soon after, though. Story 15. Not me, but my sister. She was working in retail sales at a large popular mall in a large city a few years ago. One day as she arrived at the mall for work, she stopped to use the restroom the ones general mall-goers would use. After using the restroom, she went to wash her hands when she noticed in the mirror that a man was standing behind her. She made eye contact with him and apparently gave him a nod of acknowledgement. The man was apparently holding a garbage bag he had gotten out of the roost room trash can and had fashioned it like a rope. He proceeded to approach my sister and wrap it around her neck, choking her and then slamming her on the ground. She doesn't remember much, but the security camera showed the man literally choke her unconscious and then jumped and stomped on her head repeatedly. The man fled and she was found by another mall-goer. She was covered in blood and her face badly disfigured. She broke her jaw and lost several teeth. Long-term brain damage is still not known. He tried to kill her. He was a complete stranger, but the police think it was a gang initiation type of thing. The guy is now in jail for a very long time, and my sister has very severe PTSD from it. Story 16. I don't personally remember this, and only found out the story after I told my mom I have fear of looking out windows at night. Apparently, when I was 3 or 4, I was in the kitchen with my mom one night when a man came through the kitchen window and tried to stab her. My father ran in with a gun and shot at the man. He climbed back out the window and the police never found him. Another time when I was 13, we lived in an apartment complex my father owned. At night, the laundry room needed to be locked up and the change emptied. The change was close to around $100 a night. I would normally lock up the laundry building around 10 p.m. It was a really rough neighborhood, so my father had a large dog, Rottweiler Malamute mix, and he was trained to walk with me everywhere. I was a very small girl, and I'm sure that dog was a big deterrent for a lot of people. Anyway, one night I go out to close down the laundry building, and my dog won't come inside with me. He is barking up at the sky and won't follow any command I give. I cleaned up the building and gathered the coins, and the whole time my dog is standing by the door, looking up at the sky. I lock up the door and turn to leave, and a man jumps down off the roof. He has a huge knife in his hand. He yelled something over my dog, losing his mind, barking and growing. He had a crazy shit-eating grin on his face. He then tried to run at me, and my dog jumped up on him. I ran back to our apartment, and my dog stayed back to fight him. I told my dad what happened, and we ran back to get my dog and find the man. My dog was stabbed 3 times and needed to be hospitalized for days at the vet. He pulled through and lived many more years. They never found the guy. Story 17. When I was a kid, my father got into a relationship with a rather strange but still kind woman. She had a son who was only a couple years older than me. At the time, I didn't think anything of their relationship, but looking back at it, it was very abusive. I got into fights often, most of them turning physical, even when both me and my father were present. The kid would always try to push me over and hit me, but I would never say anything to my father because I didn't want to ruin his relationship. Now here's where my memory gets hazy, so take the details with a grain of salt. My father and his then girlfriend were having a conversation while I and her son were a few meters away from them. He once again tried to hit me, at which I sat on top of him to prevent that. I was a really fat kid, and he was very skinny. So despite the age difference, this somehow worked. I told him I would get up if he left me alone, and since he promised to do so, I just sat beside him. He proceeded to get on top of me and strangle me. I remember trying to cry out for help and reaching out to my father, but not being able to make a single sound and feeling like I was being pulled away from him. I'm pretty sure I passed out after that, or was at least very close, because after that I only remember that my father's girlfriend and her son were now gone. I never saw them again, though the last I heard of them was years later, after my dad received an anti-wedding invitation from her. From what my dad told me, she was angry at her son, but was even more pissed at my dad for ending the relationship. I'm pretty sure he didn't really intend to actually murder me. But then again, what is the intention of trying to strangle a 7-8-year-old kid? All in all, this was surprisingly less traumatizing than you think it would be. Story 18. When I was living overseas, a man broke into my apartment. He came in through the window of my studio apartment at about 5:30 in the morning. Thankfully, I was awake. He started to go attack me and tried to strangle me. I was able to fight him off by getting my feet up onto his chest and pushing with all my strength. This happened a few times. The only thing he would say was, "You die, you die." He was slender, and I don't think he was very prepared, and I don't think he expected me to fight back. Partway through this, when I realized that he wasn't giving up, is when I really started to get scared and think to myself that I needed a plan and to get out of there. My friend lived next door, so I decided I was going to make a run for it. Once I stood up, he ran back out the window. I grabbed my glasses and my phone and ran to my friend's apartment. Thankfully, she was awake. I told her what happened and she was like, "You have to call the police." By this time, shock was starting to set in, and for some reason, my brain was telling me, "I am okay, so nothing happened." She kept reiterating that I needed to call the police. I decided to call one of my coworkers who spoke English really well and ask her. This coworker was horrified at what happened and immediately said that she was going to call the police for me and call me back. Once the police arrived, she acted as the translator to tell them what happened. Story 19. I was in Thailand heading back to my apartment from a popular corner of bars in Chiang Mai. I went down the same streets and alleys I always did, cutting through the center of the city to the edge of the moat by Ram Hospital. I passed by the technical college and saw a group of guys hanging on the corner. I didn't think anything of it as I entered the final alley that would put me at the moat in my apartment. Two mopeds passed me and went into an alcove to my right, and as I passed it, they zoomed out and cut me off. Four guys hopped off their bikes and one approached and said, "Where are you going?" and decked me in the face. As I think, did this motherfucker really just punch me in the face? I look up and he has his arm up and holding something in a swinging motion, and I did the only thing I could, put my arms up to protect my face and yell out. After several blows to my arm, I attempted to turn and run, but his buddies were there to stop me and kept cutting off my escape. After a couple minutes, could have been less. It's all a bit of a mess of memory. They all hopped on their bikes and dipped. I have no clue why. Maybe it was my yelling, and I looked down at my arm. My left arm below the wrist was cut halfway through, one of my bones, completely exposed marrow, and everything my hand hanging uselessly at the end. And I immediately knew I was in deep ishesh, even though I didn't feel a thing. I have minor medical training, so I took note that no arteries were severed, but I was bleeding profusely and needed help. I went to the guest house nearby and asked the attendant for help. Poor thing looked faint when she saw me, lol. She got me in her car and took me to Ram Hospital, literally 100 yards away. Turns out what they guys swung at me was a machete, according to the doctor. I thought it was a cane or rod of some sort. So that's my story. It's important for me to say I stayed in Thailand for a year after this event, despite friends' pleas for me to GTFO and come home. I wasn't about to let that shy ruin a lifetime opportunity for me. Anyway, I have full function of the arm and hand now. And after 4 years of drinking to bury the memory, I'm happy to say I started therapy. 6 months ago, I quit drinking. Entirely was diagnosed with PTSD and am finally addressing the demon who's been hiding in the depths of my mind. And that mother fear has his days numbered. Story 20. My brother is prone to violent outbursts and my mother is not very good at handling them due to the fact that she's a shoddy parent and that she's only 5'2" to his 6'4". One day when he was 18 and my sister was 11, they were arguing. I stepped in to try to mediate, knowing that if he went off on her, she would be severely injured immediately. He completely snapped and picked me up by my neck, holding me against the wall and yelling at me. I couldn't reach the ground, but I was kicking him and trying to pry his fingers apart. I felt very faint, but I managed to get him to drop me onto the couch where I tried to breathe and told him he needed to go for a walk to calm down. Thankfully, he did. I guess he realized that he'd taken it further than he meant to. There were other outbursts, but that one was the worst by far. No authorities were involved because they always hung up on me when I called. I was a kid at the time, or if they did arrive, they believed he wasn't really a threat, just a good kid who had a bad day. My parents either didn't know or didn't believe me about this incident for a while, but we've since talked about it. I don't talk to that brother or my mom much, and I've had plenty of therapy to try and deal with all the feelings I have. Rage, distrust, sadness, guilt, etc. Story 21. My ex-boyfriend was not well. He was my first big-time serious boyfriend when I hit 18. 19, and he was so abusive to me. He and his friend and I went to Walmart, and his friend said something that made me laugh. My ex got out of the car and left, and we had to go everywhere looking for him. When we saw him, he threw his phone at the car because I was in the passenger seat. I got one of our mutual friends who I had known a lot longer, and we went looking, and he was at his friend's camper. He was sitting in the dark holding a gun. When I walked up, he pointed in my face and racked it. "Definitely loaded," said mutual friend who ended up getting between us and was able to take the gun from him. The guy stalked me afterwards for a while, and then I got a call around Christmas. Like a year after that, he had been murdered in Georgia and dumped at a construction site for trying to take drugs and money from 3 people who ended him quickly. Also, to be totally clear, he did a lot of horrible shit to me, said a lot of shit. Him dying was probably one of the happiest days of my life because he always told me he would finish it if I came back to my hometown. Luckily, he had gotten into bath salts and finished going crazy and ended up dying exactly how he always thought he would. Call me heartless for being glad he's dead, but I miss seeing my grandma one last time out of fear he would find me, and I'll never see her again. Story 22. There was this guy who I used to chat with at the bar. He was a little weird but seemed lonely, so I would talk to him because I felt a little sorry for him. This went on for months, and eventually he asked me out, and as tactfully as I could, I said no. I wasn't interested in seeing anyone now, and I thought he was okay with it. He'd do and say the occasional inappropriate thing that made me feel uneasy, but not bad enough to be rude or make him feel alone, and we both liked horses. So that's pretty much what we talked about. I thought he was fine with this, and things went on as before, but then he came in with a friend from work, and I was sitting with them, and the friend was extremely obnoxious and loudly making all these rape and GHB jokes. Like he just wouldn't stop even after I said he was making me feel uncomfortable. He said in a condescending tone, "You don't really think we are going to rape you, do you?" And I felt stupid and ashamed and said no, but they kept going on. And finally I said I was going to the washroom and please get the jokes out of your system while I'm gone or I'll leave. That was very stupid and it gave them time to dose my drink. Now it doesn't make you pass out like many assume, but it kind of makes you a suggestible zombie, but also get drunk a lot faster or enhances the effect of the alcohol, whatever. Anyway, he told my other friends I wasn't well and he's going to take me home and I'll be safe. And after that, I don't remember anything till being in his room and the assault happening. It was surreal. Like I was floating through the ceiling watching what was happening from above and trying to will my body to get up, run and get up, run, get up, run. But it was like a marionette with the strings cut. Then he pushed my shoulder really hard and I heard a low snap and I rushed back into my body and I had the sensation of dying, of being drowned in blackness. Much later, I woke up and it was day, as there was light coming around the curtains and I managed to find my things and get out. But I have PTSD from it to this day and I need a cane to walk. Also, the police did nothing, so I also have PTSD from the patronizing way I was treated by the police after this. Story 23. Me and my sister used to argue a lot. Had a particularly bad one, retreated up to my room when she started getting vicious. And physical figured, she'd take the wind, close my door, and lay down, ended up napping. Woke up a little bit later, hearing the door open. While I was getting my bearings, I realized she was in my room going around my bed towards my computer, just about the only valuable possession I had. I lashed out and kicked her harder than I probably would have been willing to do while actually awake. She staggered back and dropped something, spat some swear words at me, and fled when I repeatedly shouted for her to get the F out. Only realized a few minutes later what she dropped was a knife, one of the sharp kitchen knives. I had a big bed because it was free, so I slept on the side closer to my computer. Still don't know for sure if she was going for the computer or going for me, but not long after this, she went on a drunken walkabout with a friend. Cops got called, our mother got called in from her boyfriend's place, sister tried to steal boyfriend's car, and ma'am finally washed her hands of her, ended up going into foster care, or so I understood. She was like 14 at the time. About that. I was 16. Story 24. I went on a third date with a guy I met online. Everything up to this point seemed totally normal. We had talked for months before actually meeting due to the pandemic, so at this point I'd known him for almost 6 months. After the date, I invited him over, and honestly, my intention was to sleep with him that night. But once we got upstairs, I just wasn't feeling it and told him I wanted to wait. He agreed and said he thought he should go. I walked him to the door, but when I turned around, he pushed me up against a wall and started being really rough. I thought he was joking until he pulled me to the ground and pinned me. Once I realized what was going on, I struggled and started to fight like hell. His eyes turned black, and I could tell he was enjoying seeing me so scared. I tried negotiating, begging, crying, fighting. He was like a robot on autopilot. At that point, to stop me from struggling, he just started to hit me as hard as he could in the face and head. I played dead until he stopped. He was so turned on by this that the act took a split second. Then he just got up and left me there thinking I was unconscious or dead. I reported they got DNA, but he was never caught. Turns out everything he told me about himself was fake and his phone was a burner. To this day, I have no idea who he was or if he will come back to hurt me again. I had just bought my condo, so didn't want to move, but seriously considered it. Luckily, the building was already in the midst of adding more security cameras, fob keys, guards, etc. I got an alarm system even though my floor is elevator locked, need a fob to access. Story 25. I was 17 at the time. I was wicked sick one weekend, and my mother decided I needed to go to the hospital. She had been drinking all day as she was a terrible alcoholic. It turned out that I had strep throat, so they are typing out my discharge paperwork, and my mother approached the desk where the nurse was sitting. Clearly stinking of alcohol, the nurse told my mother that she wouldn't be allowed to drive me home because she was clearly intoxicated. This sent my mother into a drunken rage, swearing and threatening the nurse, who told her if she left, the police would be called. My mother grabbed me and hurries me into the car. I start yelling at her about how irresponsible she is and how she is ruining her life with alcohol. This pisses her off even more. We only live less than a mile away, but my mother has taken a different route than normal. When I ask why, she just says it's the long way and she doesn't want to get caught. As we're traveling down this dark main back road, she begins speeding like crazy. We were doing at least 90 miles per hour when she looks over at me with a blank face and says, "I'm sorry." She then pulled the e-brake and cut the wheel, sending us flying off the road. The next thing I remember is sitting in the front seat of a pickup truck with an EMT shining a flashlight in my eyes along who the president was. I responded that Bill Clinton was the president 2000. Apparently, she had crashed us into a huge rock at the end of someone's property directly on my side of the car. Apparently, I crawled over her and staggered to the door of the property to ask for help. They put us in different ambulance, and we headed back to the hospital we just left. Upon arrival, the nurse my mother fought with said, "I knew you'd be back." My mother, in a drunken, semi-conscious state, kept saying, "I'm sorry I tried to kill you. I love you," over and over. She suffered several broken ribs, a broken collarbone, broken nose, and cracked vertebrae. I had a concussion and some cuts on my face from the door window, basically exploding on impact with the rock. She was sentenced to some alcohol program through the courts and some community service. She suffered severe depression, and 6 months after this, she took her own life in another car accident. She actually asked me if I wanted to go for a ride with her that night, and I told her no, "I'll see you when you get home." That was the last thing I ever said to her. Story 26. I'm an older guy, and this younger fellow, the son of one of my pals, was down on his luck. Couldn't find a steady job, bouncing around from job to job, etc. He was always a little odd but quiet, and I invited him to stay with me rent-free if he didn't mind taking care of stuff around the house. Mow the grass, help prepare food, minor maintenance stuff like that. I'm getting too old and my house is too big. He agreed, and things were fine for a while. We developed a good relationship. We'd play chess every night, eat together. I tried to help him with job interviews, and he held up his end of the bargain with the housework. I developed a pretty bad cataract in one eye, and it was clearly bothering him. He'd stare at it, and his face would just go blank. He was always kind of odd, but something changed in his demeanor. I caught him peeking his head in my room at night when he thought I was sleeping. He stopped eating with me and withdrew into his room. After about a week, I woke up in the middle of the night. I knew he was in my room, but I couldn't see him. You know that sixth sense when you can just feel someone is by you? Suddenly, I'm thrown from my bed and he's on top of me, trying to smother me with my own bedsheets. I screamed so loud the neighbors heard and called the police. I managed to get out of his grip, lock myself in the bathroom until the police arrived. Scariest moment of my life. When they arrested him, he kept rambling about my eye and voices in heaven and hell. Last I knew, he was in a mental health facility. Story 27. My father had several mental disorders, which I later learned. He tried to murder me when I was 9 years old after years of physical, mental, and emotional abuse. His mental disorders that I'm now aware of included anger issues, bipolar disorder, PTSD, and paranoia. He would tell me all the time that he hated me because I looked like, and reminded him of my mother who divorced him after he hit her. His abuse continued for years because he told me if I told her about it, he'd kill me, and her and my mom was unaware because he only ever hit her once, so I don't think she realized he'd abuse his own child. One day he was especially bad. I remember I had multiple fractured ribs, a fractured collarbone, and several bruises, cuts. By this point, I was already into horror movies, thankfully, and all I could think of because of that was get a knife, because the damsel in distress always goes for a knife. I managed to get some distance between us by running inside. I went straight to the kitchen and grabbed a knife off the counter, then got down on my knees and elbows to use my body to hide it. It was a big butcher knife. I heard him stop behind me, and when I saw him lean forward, I turned and lashed out at him, leaving a sizable gash across his face. It didn't kill him, but he died when I was 13 due to a heart attack. That was the last time I saw him, other than when I saw him in court for my mom to get full custody. She asked me during the hearing about the gash. All I said was, I cut him. But I think she put the pieces together because she never pressured about why. Story 28. It was Halloween 2020, and my friends and I were in a park in North London, setting off fireworks as a celebration. Totally benign and good vibes. Sometime into the night at around 9 p.m., a car pulled up and set off fireworks aimed at us, some of which hit my friend. My friend immediately ran to his car and chased after the perpetrators, with the rest of us following suit. Once we caught up to the car, we discovered two youths around 18-19 who were completely unapologetic. Well, my friend did not like that, so took the rest of his fireworks in his car and snapped it in two to teach him a lesson. That was that. We parted ways with the driver saying, "Enjoy your night, lads," with a very chilling smile. I had a bad feeling from that moment, but remained in the park with my friends to continue the celebration, stupidly, despite saying to my mates we should leave. 20 minutes later, around 3 cars pulled up with more fireworks, and a whole bunch of youths with knives jumped out of the car and started to terrorize us. Me wanting to protect my car and not realizing what was going on, stupidly went forth to my car in an attempt to get to it and drive away. My best friend came with me for some stupid reason. The rest of my friends dispersed, running away. Once I got to my car, I jumped in, and my hand was shaking so much that I dropped my keys in between the clutch and my car seat. I was frantically trying to reach it and was making a bit of commotion, so much so that the attackers noticed that my friend and I were in the car and beckoned the other attackers over. They proceeded to try to break the window, roaring at me to come outside. For some reason, God was on my side that night, as my VW Polo windscreen and windows did not cave in. It was incredibly close. They were beating on the windows for close to 2 minutes, and any longer it would have caved. One of them even had a gun they were brandishing. In the UK, guns are illegal here. They must have run out of adrenaline and realized the police would be en route, so they ran off in a hurry. 2 of my mates got stabbed that day, one in the kidney, one in the neck, with both surviving their injuries. But it really could have gone left for me, and I consider that night as the night I should have died. We messed with the completely wrong people. Story 29. I took a date out of town to a zoo, and on the way back into town, we stopped at a popular ice cream shop. Once we get our ice cream, I decide to pull over into a shopping center to park so I could enjoy the ice cream without driving. This shopping center had a few big stores in it, but the bulk of things were closed or closing, as it was about 11 p.m. So there weren't many people around, but I didn't think anything of it. It was a sort of nice night. We had the windows down in the car, and we just sat there and talked for a few minutes, even after we finished the ice cream. At some point during our conversation, out of the corner of my eye, I see something shiny in my side mirror. It turned out to be a knife, and some guy was coming up to the car. He didn't say anything. He swung the knife in the car. He kept flailing the knife around. I climb on top of my date in the passenger seat, kicking at the guy who was wildly swinging the knife. I go into my glove box, grab my pistol, and I fired it 4 times. I then got out of the car and found out there was another guy who was at the passenger door, but he was unarmed. He ran off once I shot. He was messing with my date. He prevented her from being able to get out of the car so we could get away from the knife guy. I got cut and stabbed in my legs and my left arm a bit. All superficial stuff, thankfully. Lots of stitches, bandages, and pain, but I was fine. The person I shot wasn't so lucky as I hit him directly with 3 of the 4 shots and grazed him with the 4th. He was still alive when the ambulance rolled up, but he didn't make it to the hospital. Story 30. When I was almost 17, I was kidnapped by my friend's boyfriend. While I was at a Wendy's and when I tried to open the door to get out, he was fortunately very stupid and didn't use the safety locks for kids in the back seat of the truck. He threatened to kill all 3 of us, me, his GF, and another friend I was eating with when he took us. I obviously didn't jump out of the moving truck even though I didn't visually see the gun. He forced us back into my house where he raped my friend, his GF, in front of us as a threat. His GF was an innocent abused party and I never blamed her for what happened. He made us watch while he took a baggie of cocaine out of his pocket and cut lines on my dresser. Got super high and beat his GF. He tried to suffocate me with a beach towel he found in the closet, but I managed to fight him off and he got bored of me and went back to torturing his GF. Somehow I managed to sneak to the kitchen and called my mom. If I was gonna die, I wanted to say goodbye. That's why I didn't call 911 first. My mom ended up calling the cops, but the guy fled in his truck, and when they did find him, he got a slap on the wrist. My landlord claimed after that she had heard us yelling, but yet she never sent help and just listened to what was happening. We were juniors in high school 2006, and the principal did expel this dude permanently. Last I knew about him as a teen was that his dad beat him senseless and tried to sue the school for the expulsion. Saw him a decade later at a bar with his wife, but ran for my life and got the hell out of there immediately. Story 31. Important to the story. My boyfriend at the time of almost a year was very abusive and had emotionally manipulated me to be extremely reliant on him. And at this point I was 15. So I was struggling with mental health issues. And on that particular day, I felt very strongly that if I was left alone, I would be a risk to myself. So I reached out to him, asked him to go on a walk with me thinking it would distract me. How wrong I was. As I am explaining how I am feeling to him, I can see he seems to be 1,000 miles away. And when I managed to get him to look at me again, I could see that the way he looked at me had changed. Safe to say I was terrified. We talked and walked, and suddenly we are walking across a bridge when he just stops. I remember him turning to me in cold as ice, explaining to me why I should jump. At first I thought he was trying to show me how stupid my urge to self-destruct was, until his hands were locked around my wrists. We were up on that bridge for hours with him desperately trying to get me over the railings, while I pleaded with him to let me live and not die like this. I remember seeing people's faces as they walked past, silently begging them to realize I was in danger, that it wasn't just some lover's tiff, but no one came to my rescue. At one point he put me down knowing I was too exhausted from struggling to go anywhere, and began grabbing my things, my phone and bag. He was texting my mom as me telling her I was going to kill myself. I couldn't believe it, he had been planning this, and I never once realized. He then called my mom from his phone pretending to be terrified for me and that he had lost me. The way his voice changed so easily from angry monster to scared boyfriend will never leave me. It was then I knew I had a very short amount of time to escape. He thought I was injured from the abuse and struggle, so felt safe enough to begin his plan of planting my phone and bag under the bridge by the dual carriageway. The moment he was out of sight, I was moving like never before. I knew the police station was down the road, and if I got 5 minutes down the path, I was likely to bump into one. I was so close I could see a police officer when an arm clamped across my waist. I could fight no longer. I really was done. I started to accept that this is the way I would go. He would throw my body over the railing, and I would die the idiot whose love got them killed. But I was wrong. The officer turned around and waved to us. He started to walk towards us, and relief washed over me. I knew he might try again soon, but for today he had failed. He wouldn't have gotten away with it now. He fooled the officer, played the hero, collected my things, and got me home to my mom, who then thanked him profusely. We broke up a few months later, and eventually the truth did come out, but nothing was ever done. Story 32. About 16 years ago, I was leaving work to go to my last physiotherapy appointment. Back injury. I worked in the heart of downtown, but physio was on the north side of town. So the quickest way to get there was to use the train LRT, as the stations were close to work and close to the physio office, so I would not need to take the bus. As I got into the train station, I heard that my train was coming, so I ran down the stairs as fast as I could, because if I missed this one, then I would have to wait 20 minutes for the next one, and that would make me late for my appointment. I got down to the bottom of the stairs at the train platform and turned toward the track where my train was coming in. As I turned towards the track, I suddenly felt two hands on the back of my coat, pushing as hard as they could toward the tracks. With little to no time to process what was happening, all I was able to do was jump as best I could once I was at the ledge. I leapt as far as I could, making it all the way to the other side of the tracks and the wall just as the train came rushing into the station. It was such a close call that as I leaped across the track, the train struck one of my feet. It just grazed me as I got across to watch the train come screeching to a stop in the station. Once the train was fully stopped, I stepped up on the coupler in between the train cars and back on the platform where a group of other people were yelling, "He's right there!" and pointing at the man who just tried to kill me. Filled with rage and a desire to remove his head from his shoulders, I started walking towards the man who just sat down and tried to act like everything was fine, and thought to myself how I was going to end this fool for trying to do the same to me. As I got close to him, transit security appeared and stepped in between the man and I, and potentially stopped me from committing a terrible crime. I even offered them $1,000 each if they just turned around for a minute, so I could at least give this guy the hardest haymaker punch I could muster. But they said there was cameras everywhere and it was just not possible. So mad. They then informed me that as transit security, they were only able to subdue the man once he was arrested, and as there were no cops around, it would have to be a citizen's arrest, and I had to be the one to do it. In order to do so, I had to approach the man, tell him he is under citizen's arrest, then make physical contact of some sort. I did exactly as the security set up to the point of making physical contact. When it got to that part of it, time froze, and my mind ran the gauntlet of different scenarios about how I could possibly beat the piss out of this guy. But I was able to collect myself enough to realize that I am allergic to going to jail, so I just put my arm on the sleeve of his coat. Immediately after doing this, transit security cuffed him. While waiting for the cops, I asked him why he did that. His response was, George and Saddam told him he needed to do it, and that I was supposed to be his salvation. The security guards then searched him, and in his coat pocket he had written a letter to the president of China stating he needed more rice rations. Out of his damn mind, the cops came and took him away shortly after. He was ordered to undergo a 30-day psychiatric evaluation. After that was done, he was found not able to be tried due to mental issues, then freed back out to the public. WTF, I found out shortly after he was released that he had done this before. 3 years prior, a woman who was 6 months pregnant was waiting for her train when he pushed her onto the tracks. She lost her baby because of it, but he got the 30-day psychiatric evaluation and found not capable of being tried because he was crazy, then released. What a joke. How did it affect me? Well, I have not been on the train in 16 years. I also suffered from vivid nightmares for years about different ways I get killed on transit. Even to this day, I still have a nightmare about it once every couple of months. Story 33. I dated a guy for a couple months that just had red flags all over him, so I called it quits over text eventually. It was not serious and we were not exclusive. He showed up at my house 20 minutes later. I lived in the hood and he climbed a 10 fence to get onto the property. He violently banged on all the windows and doors, screaming, "You don't get to leave me." I cracked open the door with the chains still on and my gun in hand and asked him to leave. He kicked my door open, rushed me, punched me, pulled chunks of my hair out, and choked me until I passed out. He is 6'4", and I'm only 5'1", so I can't reach his body, but I'm clawing at his arms till I'm blacked out. When I finally wake up, he's sitting on my bed and crying with my gun against his head. I think he thought I was dead. It took me an hour of telling him whatever he wanted to hear before he finally put the gun down, acted like nothing happened, and left. I cried by myself for a few hours until I got a call from another guy I had been seeing, an attorney. I bawled my eyes out to him. He picked me up and helped me get a restraining order. The neighborhood gang said they caught him trying to scale the fence, pulled him off and roughed him up a little. I moved and changed jobs. My old landlord told me while he was sprucing up the place for the next tenant, he came back and was screaming my name outside the house and left when he came out and said I no longer lived there. 6 years later, I got a FB message from a woman who moved in with him shortly after this incident. I gather from this timeline they must have began dating while we were dating. I think there was some sort of background check to move in together, so he explained the DVRO. I didn't pursue assault charges, just the restraining order, as us being just friends, having an argument and me being some sort of vengeful psychopath and lying to law enforcement that he attacked me. Basically saying I was some Asian Karen who wielded my Asian privilege against a black man. So she got this place with him believing his story. And less than a month later, she realized he was all bad when he punched his own dog and threatened to kill her cat. She tried to break up with him and he locked her in the bathroom and tortured her for over 6 hours, choking her with cables and cutting her all over with a knife. He had an erection while he was doing it. And then he got a phone call from his parents. He took it in the living room she escaped, and people on the street helped her. They gave him a fairly light sentence because the judge had some sympathy for him as a veteran. He got out of prison and she saw him on the street. She reached out to me to warn me that he was out after basically cyber-stalking me for years, wondering what really happened. Story 34. My brother came to stay with us because a major hurricane was coming and was supposed to hit where he lived. My brother and I always had a toxic relationship. We would fight one day and be best friends the next. First night he's there. We are having an awesome time, having some drinks, talking about memories as kids and so on. He decided to go on one of his tangents about US grants and blah, blah, blah. I was done with hearing it and got up to leave. He jumped in front of me and said I wasn't going anywhere. I pushed him and said, "Move." I got around him and went inside. Before I knew it, he was strangling me. He was fighting for my life. I couldn't get his face to punch him. I just kept scratching his arms because I couldn't breathe. The look in his eyes was pure hate and not him. His girlfriend woke up and tried to intervene. He threw her across the bed with his other hand. I passed out from not breathing and hit the floor. When I came to, he came after me again because I was not dead. I had super strength at this point and picked up a dog grooming table and flung it at him across the room, screaming for help. My mom came out of her room and intervened. She denied everything and said that I went nuts for no reason. I called the police, had him arrested and pressed charges. He spent a year in jail. We haven't spoken since then, 4 years ago. About a year ago, the girlfriend that tried to save me, he strangled her also and tried to kill her. Up until that moment, my mom didn't believe that he tried to kill me. When it all happened, I couldn't talk for 2 weeks. He hurt my throat so bad that it was swollen and bruised, and I couldn't even talk. Eating was a chore. Also, he is dead to me story.